Warm greetings to one and all present. I hope everyone is doing well. I, Dr. Shikha Dhiman, Assistant Professor, Department of Laws, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, will be sharing my views on the topic Rationale behind the insertion of fundamental duties. Let's begin with the introduction. The true source of the rights is duty. If we all discharge our duties, rights will not be far to seek. If leaving duties unperformed, we run after rights, they will escape us like will-o'-the-wisp. The more we pursue them, the farther they fly. Very rightly said by Mahatma Gandhi. The fundamental duties were inserted into the Constitution of India by 42nd Amendment Act 1976 under Article 51A of the Constitution. These duties were added on the recommendation of the Swayam Prabha Committee. No duties were incorporated at the time of the commencement of Constitution, as we were already acting as slaves and performing our duties. None of the constitution of the Western countries provide for the duties of the citizens, whereas the constitution of the socialist countries lay greater emphasis on fundamental duties. The idea behind the incorporation of fundamental duties was to emphasize the obligations of the citizens in exchange of the comprehensive fundamental rights enjoyed by them. Basically, the fundamental duties are incorporated with the purpose of making the citizens patriotic, help them to follow a code of conduct that would strengthen the nation, protect the sovereignty and integrity, help the state in performing its diverse duties, and of course, promoting the ideals of harmony, unity, common brotherhood, and religious tolerance. These ideals are the very cornerstone of the Indian Constitution. The fundamental duties have highlighted the importance of the citizens in the functioning of the state and urges upon them to do their best to discharge their duties. The duties enumerated in Article 51A is a statutory duty and enforceable by law. The violation of the duties can be met with punishments, but the Constitution does not impose any penalty for the violation of the duties. It is left to the legislature to prescribe the penalty for the violation of any specific duty. The Constitution imposes upon the citizens definite duties towards the society and towards the state. The duties as mentioned in Article 51A are: number 1, to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem. Number 2, to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle for freedom. Number 3, to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. Number 4, to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. Number 5, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending the religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities, to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Number 6, to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. Number 7, to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to have compassion towards living creatures. Number 8, to develop scientific temper, humanism and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Number 9, to safeguard public property and to abjure violence. Number 10, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity, so the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavour and achievement. In number 11, who is a parent or guardian to provide opportunities for education to his child, or as the case may be, the ward between the age of 6 and 14 years, and this fundamental duty was inserted by 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002. Now let's learn some facts about fundamental duties. It is contained in Article 51A under Part 4A of the Constitution. It has been borrowed from the Constitution of the USSR. It was added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. Initially, only 10 duties were added, and the 11th fundamental duty was added by 86th Amendment Act 2002. Fundamental duties, just like directive principles of state policy, are non-enforceable. These duties were added primarily on the recommendation of Swaran Singh Committee. Fundamental duties apply only to citizens and do not extend to the foreigners. Now let's talk about the features of the fundamental duties as given in the Constitution. The Indian Constitution's fundamental duties, as stated in Article 51A, have the following unique features. Number 1, non-justiciable. These duties cannot be enforced by the courts in accordance with the law. Nonetheless, they act as moral duties and principles to the citizens of the country. Number 2, the application scope. Only citizens are subject to these obligations. Foreigners are not bound as such by these obligations. Number 3, directive nature. By acting as a moral compass and guiding citizens' behavior, these duties help us to create a society that is law-abiding and responsible. Number 4, codification of Indian values. These duties are the principles that have guided the Indian customs and traditions. As such, they are essentially a systematization of duties which are vital to the Indian way of life. Number 5, moral and civic. Some of them are civic obligations, for example, upholding the Constitution, while others are moral obligations, for example, preserving the high standards of national independence movement. Number 6, derived from various sources. The Constitution of the former Soviet Union, Mahatma Gandhi's ideas, and the opinions of other constitutional experts are some of the sources from where these responsibilities have been impired. They show a synthesis of ideals from around the world and the country. Now let's see what is the relevance or significance of fundamental duties in the Constitution. Fundamental duties serves as a reminder to the citizens that while they are enjoying their rights, They should also be aware about their duties towards other citizens, society and the country. Fundamental duties serves as a warning against anti-national and anti-social activities. For example, burning of national flag, destroying any public property, etc. It serves as a source of inspiration for the citizens and promote a sense of discipline as well as commitment among them. These duties help in raising the national goals by active participation of citizens rather than mere spectators. Fundamental duties help the courts in examining and determining the constitutional validity of a law. Fundamental duties are ideal in nature and lead the citizens in right direction. Fundamental duties define the moral obligations of all the citizens to help in the promotion of spirit of patriotism and uphold the unity of the nation. Fundamental duties also make the citizens conscious about his social and citizenship responsibilities and also considerate the inalienable rights of our fellow citizens. Now let's discuss about the evolution of fundamental duties in India. Originally, the Indian Constitution did not contain any provision for the fundamental duties. However, their need and necessity were felt during the operation of internal emergency from 1975 to 1977. Accordingly, steps were taken by the government that led to the incorporation and evolution of the fundamental duties in India. Now let's see what did the Swayam Committee talk upon their fundamental duties. It was opined that in addition to the enjoyment of the fundamental rights, citizens must also perform certain duties. This recommendation was made by a committee whose head was Swayam Singh. In regard to this, in 1976, a committee was set up to make recommendations for incorporating the fundamental duties which had become the need of an hour after emergency. The committee recommended that there should be separate chapter for fundamental duties which will make the citizen conscious about their duties at the same time when they are enjoying their fundamental rights. The government approved the recommendations and added Article 51A under Part 4A of the Constitution. Although the Swayam Committee suggested only 8 fundamental duties, but the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act added 10 fundamental duties. All the recommendations of the Swayam Committee were accepted, but only few recommendations were denied. Following recommendations are the ones which were denied by the government. Number 1. The Parliament may provide for the imposition of punishment or penalty as considered suitable for the non-compliance of the duties. Number 2. Such punishment won't be questioned in the court of law because if the punishments were being imposed for the non-fulfillment of duties, it will be a burden on judiciary to decide such matters because duties are comprehensive in nature unlike the fundamental rights. And number 3 was duty to pay the taxes by the citizens. Now after that came Justice Verma Committee on Fundamental Duties. Justice Verma Committee was constituted in 1998 to plan for a methodology for operationalizing the fundamental duties for the purpose of teaching in educational institutions as well as to make it enforceable. The committee provided various legal provisions for the enforcement of fundamental duties. Now, different legal provisions are as follows. Number 1, the Prevention of Insult to National Owners Act 1971, that was in regard with Article 51A Clause A. The Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 in context with Article 51A Clause C. Third, Indian Penal Code with Article 51A Clause C. Fourth, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1955 in consonance with Article 51A Clause H and Clause I. Fifth, Representation of Peoples Act 1951 with Article 51A Clause E and Clause H. Sixth, Wildlife Protection Act 1972 with Article 51A Clause G. Forest Conservation Act 1980 with Article 51A Clause G. Now, let us come over the importance of fundamental duties. The Indian Constitution's fundamental obligations are significant because they help citizens develop a sense of social solidarity, patriotism and responsibility. The following examples show how important they are. First, encourage civic consciousness. These responsibilities help persons develop a sense of civic consciousness and duty towards their country and society. For instance, they serve as a reminder of their duty to preserve the principles set forth in the Constitution. Second, harmonization with the rights. These obligations support the Constitution's fundamental rights. Fundamental duties serve as a reminder to the citizens of their reciprocal obligations towards the society and the country, while the fundamental rights grant entitlements. Third, encourage public participation. They provide citizens the impression that they are actively involved in achieving national objectives rather than only being observers. Number 4, preservation of national unity and integrity. These responsibilities place a strong emphasis on upholding the Constitution's principles and encouraging a shared commitment to the welfare of nation above and beyond the personal considerations. Number 5, inculcation of moral and ethical values. By encouraging integrity, honesty and respect for others, these responsibilities help citizens develop moral and ethical values. Number 6, promote democratic ideals. These responsibilities, these duties which are necessary for a healthy democracy to function, serve to uphold democratic ideals through civic participation and responsible citizenship. Number 7, promotes social welfare. By encouraging the residents to uphold peace and the spirit of fraternity, these responsibilities help to build inclusive and harmonious communities. Number 8, promotion of education and culture. Some fundamental duties places a strong emphasis on the value of upholding India's rich cultural legacy, which also encourages scientific temper, education and the advancement of scientific knowledge. Number 9, complements the fundamental rights. While fundamental rights grant people personal freedom, fundamental duties serve as a reminder to the citizens' obligations to one another and to the society. They guarantee that personal liberties are used properly by striking a balance between rights and obligations. Number 10, the legal system aids. According to the Supreme Court rulings, a court may consider a law to be reasonable in relation to either Article 19 that talks about 6 freedoms or Article 14 that talks about equality before law, if it finds that the law in question aims to give effect to a fundamental duty. As a result, they support the judiciary in assessing and deciding whether a statute is constitutional or not. 11th, international acknowledgement. By demonstrating Indian citizens' commitment to democratic norms and constitutional principles, the inclusion of fundamental duties improves India's reputation internationally. Number 12, legal and constitutional framework. Lawmakers and policy makers use these responsibilities as a guide for creating laws and programs that would improve the society. Now, we will talk over the criticism of the fundamental duties. It is unenforceable. One of the most important duty, that is duty to pay the taxes and family planning, are not covered in this. Next, the provision under Article 51A is ambiguous. The list is non-exhaustive. Some of the duties are very difficult to comprehend by an average person. There are disproportionate limitations. There is no division of economic and social duties. So, now these are few of the drawbacks or the loopholes of fundamental duties in the Constitution. Now, let us talk over some of the landmark case laws. Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala. In this case, the Supreme Court held that proper respect was shown by the students to the national anthem by standing up in silence when the national anthem was being sung. Not joining in the singing, the court held, did not amount to committing disrespect to the national anthem. Another case, Shyam Narayan Chowsky versus Union of India. The apex court directed everybody to mandatorily rise to show respect while the national anthem was played in theatres, and the audience are obliged to stand up except the people with any kind of disabilities. In another case of MC Mehta versus Union of India, 1988. In this case, the Supreme Court, having regard to the grave consequences of the pollution of water and air and the need for protecting and the improvement of the natural resources. Another case, Vellore Citizens Well Forum versus Union of India. The court recognized the precautionary principle, which mandated that where there were threats of serious and irreversible damage, lack of scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing the measures to prevent environmental degradation. Another case, Indirect Tax Practitioner Association versus R.K. Jain. Very important case. In this case, the respondent published editorial highlighting the irregularities in the appointments, posting and the transfer of members of the CESTAT tribunal, and also the unusual orders passed by it, which were not shown to be incorrect, in contempt proceedings instituted against him. The apex court finally said that the respondent could be appropriately described as whistleblower for the system, who was merely discharging his constitutional fundamental duty as a citizen enshrined in Article 51A Clause H, which enjoined the citizens to develop the scientific temper, humanism and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Another one important case, AIMS Student Association versus AIMS. In this case, the apex court observed that the fundamental duties, though not enforceable by a writ of court, yet provide a valuable guide and aid to the interpretation of constitutional and legal issues. The duties could be a guiding factor in testing the reasonableness of restrictions under Article 19 Clause 2 to 19 Clause 6. In Shri Ranganath Mishra versus Union of India, the Supreme Court ruled that the social punishments should be used in addition to legal ones in order to protect the fundamental duties. In addition to this, the court observed that the Justice J.S. Verma Committee's recommendations for the public's broad education about fundamental duties must be carried out. Now, let us talk upon the relationship between fundamental duties and fundamental rights. First of all, we will discuss the differences. Fundamental duties, they are contained in Part 4 of the Constitution, whereas fundamental rights, they are contained in Part 3 of the Constitution. Fundamental duties are given in Article 51A, whereas fundamental rights are given from Article 14 to 35. Fundamental duties, they are comprehensive in nature, whereas fundamental rights, they are given in a detailed manner. Fundamental duties are borrowed from the USSR. Fundamental rights are borrowed from the Constitution of USA. Fundamental duties, they are defined as moral obligations of all citizens. Fundamental rights, they are defined as basic human rights of all citizens. Fundamental duties can be taken away. Fundamental rights cannot be taken away. Fundamental duties, these are unenforceable in the court of law. Fundamental rights, they are enforceable in the court of law. Fundamental duties can be taken away, whereas the fundamental rights can be suspended only during emergency. Fundamental duties are absolute in nature. On the other side, the fundamental rights are not absolute in nature as they contain certain reasonable restrictions. Fundamental duties are applicable only to citizens, whereas the rights are applicable to citizens as well as non-citizens. Fundamental duties are absolutely amendable without any conditions. Fundamental rights are amendable on a condition that it should not destroy the basic structure. Duties, they are the political, social and economic in character, and rights, they are simply political and social in character. Fundamental duties are less towards the individual or more towards the state or nation, whereas the fundamental rights are available against the individual as well as the state. Now, let us come over the similarities between the fundamental rights and duties. First is the basis. Number 1, dignity of women. The provisions in fundamental rights are Article 15 Clause 3, that is the special provision for women. Article 21, that talks about where a woman has a right against sexual harassment of women at workplace to protect dignity and sanctity of women, and further women's right to make reproductive choice, privacy of working women in dance bars. And whereas in fundamental duties, we have the provision in Article 51A Clause E. Next basis is religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities. In fundamental rights, we have the provisions, that is Article 25 Clause 1. All persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right freely to profess, practice and propagate religion. Article 28 Clause 1. No religious institution shall be provided in any educational institution wholly maintained out of state funds. Article 29 Clause 1. Any section of the citizens residing in the territory of India or any part thereof, having a distinctive language, script or culture of its own, shall have the right to conserve the same. On the other side, we have the provision in fundamental duties that is Article 51A Clause E. Third basis, respect to the national flag. In fundamental rights, we have Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A, that is right to fly the national flag. And in fundamental duties, we have the provision Article 51A Clause A. Fourth basis, protect the sovereignty and integrity of India. In fundamental rights, we have the provision Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A, that is no right to call or enforce any bandh, hartals or blockades. Another provision Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause G, no right to carry on any antisocial or dangerous activity. On the other side, fundamental duties, we have Article 51 Clause C and Clause I. Another basis, to protect and improve the natural environment and living creatures. In fundamental rights, we have the provision Article 21 that talks about right to live in unpolluted environment, right to sustainable development and duty to preserve life. Whereas in fundamental duties, we have the provision Article 51A Clause G. Another basis, excellence in all spheres of individuals and collective activity. In fundamental rights, we have the provisions Article 16, that is equality of opportunity in matters of public employment, and Article 21, that is right to health and timely medical aid. Whereas in fundamental duties, we have Article 51A Clause J. Another basis, provide opportunities for education to children. In fundamental rights, we have Article 21A, that is right to education, and in fundamental duties, we have the provision Article 51A Clause K. Now, let us come over the relation between fundamental duties and directive principles of state policy. As both are non-justiciable in nature, the directive principles of state policy also form a type of rights to be enjoyed by the citizens. Thus, the relationship between the directive principles of state policy and the fundamental duties is also of a correlative and complementary nature. The same is illustrated as under fundamental duties. Article 51A Clause G provides for a fundamental duty of citizens to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, wildlife, etc. On the other side, we have Article 48A under the directive principles of state policy, which directs the state to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and wildlife. In fundamental duties, we have Article 51A Clause K that asks the citizens to provide opportunities for education to his child or ward between the age of 6 to 14 years. Whereas in directive principles of state policy, we have Article 45 that directs the state to provide early childhood care and education for all children until they complete the age of 6 years. Another, we have Article 51A Clause F, which asks the citizens to value and preserve the rich heritage of country's composite culture. And in directive principles of state policy, we have Article 49, which directs the state to protect monuments, places and objects of artistic and historic interest which are declared to be of national importance. Now, let us conclude the topic. The addition of fundamental duties along with the exceptions to the fundamental limit the operation and the free enjoyment of the fundamental rights. The critics have called these duties as moral precepts, pious platitudes, vague and repetitive. They questioned the very wisdom of incorporating them in the Constitution. According to them, it is very difficult to comprehend fully the meaning of some of the duties, as for example, cherish and follow the noble ideals of the freedom struggle, scientific temper, humanism and excellence. However, there is no doubt that these duties are a constant reminder to us of the national goals as well as basic norms of political order. They may inspire us to inculcate in ourselves a sense of social responsibility. They are much of an educational and psychological value of the citizens. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel said, "Every citizen must remember that he is an Indian and he has every right in this country, but with certain duties." Thank you everyone for your time and attention. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope that everyone has understood the topic. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you all. Take care.